This morning, I saw a clip of Mohammad Hijab being reacted to by Richard Dawkins on his official YouTube channel. A very strange thing to wake up to. But anyway, in this clip, Dawkins is saying a few things which I want to respond to.
What happened before, say you go for the Big Bang argument?
Well, physicists are debating this. I'm not a physicist, but they're debating it. My point is that they don't know, and I don't know, and you don't know, and it doesn't help to postulate a God that did it.
How do you know that he doesn't know if you don't know? I mean, this doesn't make sense to me. And he does this all the time. If you're an ignorant person, then how do you know that someone else's ignorance is identical to your ignorance if you're ignorant? Having your epistemological cake and eating it as well at the same time, how can you have both? If you're ignorant, then don't be an arrogant, ignorant person. Because if you're an agnostic, which of course you call yourself an atheist, I mean, Richard Dawkins calls himself an atheist, but in reality, he's an agnostic. So he's saying, I don't know, but you don't know as well. But then if you don't know, how do you know that he doesn't know if you don't know? It's arrogant ignorance. Let's just call you what you are, Richard Dawkins. You're an arrogant man because you're postulating what other people do or do not know, but also you're an ignorant man because agnosticism is basically ignorance. That's all it is.
I said a sort of standard rhetorical device, I don't know and you don't know and physicists don't know. Well, it's true that I don't know and physicists don't know. And if physicists don't know, then Piers Morgan most certainly doesn't know. And therefore, although it's correct that I don't actually know whether Piers Morgan knows anything, I'm pretty confident in saying that if the physicists don't know the answer to that question, he doesn't either.
So let's stop pretending to be humble, Mr. Dawkins. You're somebody that does claim to know. You claim to know that if life has arisen in other parts of the universe, it must have been a Darwinian process. You make that categorical claim in your interviews. You make that categorical claim in your book, A Devil's Chaplain. You claim you do know that Darwinism can actually be applied not only to biology, but to physics. That is, in fact, your argument in the God delusion. So you know certain things and you don't actually want to defend them. So isn't it better for you to stick your flag in and say, yeah, I'm willing to die on this hill. I do actually know that design is an illusion. I do actually know that Darwinism can be applied to the universe. I do actually know that God almost certainly doesn't exist. Why don't you just stick to the claims that you've been making over many, many years and fight for them, defend them, argue for them, articulate your responses? Rather than just making these short clips in which you're trying to say, well, I'm not saying I know and I'm not sure if other people know. No, you do know certain things. So let's stick to a few things that you've maintained for a number of years. You haven't really changed on these things. Design being an illusion. You've accepted that design is a good research heuristic, but you've categorically said it is an illusion. And you've also stated that design in the physical universe is an illusion, just like we have design being an illusion in the biological world. How do you know that? Why don't you defend those beliefs rather than sidestepping and pretending like you are humble? And we know that you're not. Also, something I was thinking about is that Philip Johnson actually challenged you, and he is the father of the intelligent design movement. In fact, you could say he is the one who's galvanized even your career when it comes to discussions on creationism because of his responses to yourself. Yet, when he challenged you in the early 1990s, you refused to engage with him. You refused to engage with William Lane Craig when it came to the God delusion. You've been making remarks about other intelligent design proponents like William Dembski and misrepresenting him. When you do actually have an engagement with people that disagree with you, like John Lennox, Dennis Noble, Lynn Margulis, you decisively lose. So rather than making these short clips, isn't it better for you to defend your position rather than reacting to YouTubers online? I think that would be a better approach, don't you?
What happened before the Big Bang is a standard layman question, and physicists tend to avoid the question. They tend to say there was nothing before the Big Bang, or some physicists do, not all of them do. It's a debatable point, a debated point, and some physicists think that you cannot even ask the question. It's like saying what's north of the North Pole to some physicists. But this is way, way above the head of Piers Morgan. So absolutely, I'm totally confident in saying he doesn't know. Of course he doesn't know. An agnostic doesn't know, and nobody can prove that there is no God, but one can live one's life on the assumption that there is no God. And in the God delusion, I devised a 7-point scale from 1 Let me think. One was totally confident there is a God, and 7 was totally confident that there isn't. And I call myself a 6.9. So I'm agnostic in the same sense as I'm agnostic about the tooth fairy and Mother Goose and the Easter Bunny. But there's no evidence for any of those, and there's no evidence for God either.
Okay, so you're again going into that shell of, I am not really making these claims. I'm just saying, I don't know. On this particular scale, I am here. But why are you there? Why are you 6.9? You are 6.9 because you believe design in the biological world is an illusion. You believe the central argument that you make in the God delusion is a valid argument. So you do know these things. So let's not pretend you don't know. And when it came to, say, something like the origin of the universe, you're saying, look, it's like saying what's north of the North Pole. We don't actually know if it's even comprehensible for us. Well, why don't you say the same thing about the origin of life? When you were pushed about this, you actually pointed to Crick's idea of directed panspermia. So what's going on here? Why do you selectively choose, when it comes to people responding to you, your particular position, and your other positions, you just ignore them? Why didn't you say, yes, I do say the universe gives us this idea of design, but design is an illusion, the same as the biological world, and I'm willing to defend this point? Why didn't you have a debate about it? Why didn't you have a discussion about it rather than reacting in these short clips? Anyone familiar with your work, River Out of Eden, for example, in which you're speaking about morality, you're actually speaking about how DNA has basically given us this illusion of morality, and there is no right, there is no wrong, and there is no God. Again, categorical statements. But when it comes to you defending your position, you go into this agnostic shell, this protective shell, as if you're some sort of reasoned, rational person who's just skeptical about other claims. No, you are categorical about certain claims, so you should defend them. So I hope in this short video, the viewers have seen that you don't actually defend your position very effectively. In fact, you're somebody who hides from public discourse. Now, I've written a book called Dawkins Deselected: The Extinction of New Atheism. And I've actually interviewed many of your opponents, including Alistair McGrath, Keith Ward, and intelligent design proponents. And one of them, who you actually responded to, is actually also somebody, Douglas Sachs, who I interviewed on my channel. So if anybody wants to learn more about Dawkins and why he was deselected in the great battle of the ideas that are taking place today on the internet, then please download the book, have a read, and let me know what you think.